I'm Alice Hayes. At 30, I was successful, independent, and secretly funding my entire family without them knowing. I paid off my parents' mortgage, Bethany's tuition, even her luxury apartment. Then, just days before my wedding, Bethany faked a life-threatening illness to steal the spotlight. What she didn't know, I had every receipt. And that night, I exposed everything. Before I share how one moment shattered years of silence, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been the responsible one in your family, hit like and subscribe. This story is for you. Growing up in Seabreeze, a quaint little coastal town in Oregon, Bethany and I had what looked like a perfectly normal sister relationship on the surface. She's 2 years younger than me, but from the moment she was born, she was treated like the fragile, precious baby of the family. And that never really stopped, not even after we were both well into adulthood. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, owned a small but beloved bakery and coffee shop called the Daily Crumb. They poured their lives into that place, and for a long time, it was the heartbeat of our family. But inside our home, the dynamic was different. I don't think they ever truly saw how their obvious favoritism impacted me, or how it slowly chipped away at my self-esteem. From elementary school all the way through high school, I was the one who was always trying to earn praise. I'd wake up early to help my mom with the initial morning bake. I kept my grades spotless. Straight A's were non-negotiable for me. I joined every club, every sport, everything that could possibly make me stand out or earn a gold star. Meanwhile, Bethany seemed to exist in a different orbit. She could throw the biggest tantrum over cleaning her room, and my parents would just sigh and do it for her. She'd fail a math test, and they'd instantly blame the teacher or the curriculum, or even the alignment of the stars. The pattern was so incredibly clear. I had to work tirelessly, constantly striving, to get even a sliver of recognition. Bethany, on the other hand, received boundless adoration just for being Bethany. "Alice, you're the older one," my mom would say, a familiar refrain whenever I dared to complain about the unfairness. "You need to set an example for your sister." That phrase became the soundtrack of my childhood. It was a constant biting reminder that my feelings, my efforts, my very existence always came second to Bethany's comfort, her whims, her supposed fragility. It felt like I was always being told to be more of something, while Bethany was perfect just as she was. Despite that profound lack of emotional support at home, I poured all my energy into my academics. It was my escape, my personal rebellion. I earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university on the East Coast. I chose to study biomedical engineering, a field that fascinated me and felt a million miles away from the small-town bakery life. My parents, of course, came to my graduation. It was a big deal for me, a culmination of years of relentless effort, but the entire day, they spent most of their time talking about how Bethany was struggling with her college applications, effectively minimizing my achievement, shrinking my shining moment until it felt like just another Tuesday. After college, I got a job at a fledgling biotech startup. It wasn't glamorous. Those early years were brutal, let me tell you. I was putting in 80-plus hour weeks, sometimes practically living in my cubicle, surviving on instant noodles just to save every penny I could. It was a sacrifice, a grind, but I was building something. I was proving something to myself, and it paid off. By the time I was 26, I was the lead engineer on a groundbreaking project. By 28, our company, BioLuminate, was acquired by a major pharmaceutical giant for an astronomical sum. I walked away from that deal with enough money that, if I chose, I truly never had to work another day in my life. It felt surreal. I had done it. I had built my own future, completely independent of the family dynamic that had tried to define me. It's funny how life works. My financial success, this incredible freedom I'd earned, ironically coincided with a growing darkness back home. My parents' beloved bakery, the Daily Crumb, which had been their pride and joy for over 2 decades, was in deep trouble. I started noticing little things during my infrequent visits home. My mom looked perpetually stressed. My dad seemed quieter, his shoulders slumped. They used to send me care packages of freshly baked cookies. Those stopped coming. Their conversations shifted from town gossip to vague mentions of tough times and rising costs. They didn't tell me directly how bad things were. My father, especially, was a proud man. He always believed in handling things himself. maintaining a facade of stability. I discovered the true extent of their crisis one evening when my mother called me, her voice choked with tears. They couldn't make their mortgage payment. They were 3 months behind, maxed out on credit cards, and had taken out a string of high-interest loans just to keep the bakery afloat. They were on the brink of losing everything. That night, sitting alone in my comfortable but modest apartment in Portland, a decision formed in my mind. It was a big one that I knew would ripple through our family. I would help them, but I would do it in secret. Why secret? A lot of reasons, honestly. I didn't want them to feel like failures, to lose their dignity. They had always preached financial responsibility to me, even as they indulged Bethany's every whim. The thought of them having to accept charity from their responsible daughter, the one they barely noticed, felt complicated. And truthfully, I didn't want Bethany to know I had money. She'd already shown concerning signs of jealousy whenever anything good happened in my life, anything that put me in the spotlight. I remember when I brought Daniel, my boyfriend at the time, home for Thanksgiving that year. Daniel is incredible, a talented architect with his own successful firm, kind, incredibly intelligent, and he treats me with a profound respect I'd rarely experienced. The moment Bethany met him, I noticed a subtle shift. Her laugh became louder, almost performative. She touched his arm repeatedly during conversations, lingering a little too long. And she somehow managed to mention her single and searching status at least 5 times during dinner. "Your sister seems nice," Daniel said to me later that night, completely oblivious to her flirtation. "She can be," I responded vaguely, not wanting to color his impression with my complicated and often painful history with Bethany. Daniel, bless his heart, always saw the best in people, a quality I both admired and sometimes found frustratingly naive when it came to my family. By this point, I had already established the financial arrangement that would later become the explosive centerpiece of our family drama. With the help of a very discreet and very good financial advisor, Mr. Albright, I started setting up a network of shell companies and trusts. Through these entities, I began paying my parents' mortgage, their car payments, their health insurance premiums, and slowly chipping away at their mountain of credit card debt. I even set up a scholarship fund specifically for Bethany's college tuition and was covering her apartment rent near campus. None of them, not a single one, knew the money was coming from me. My parents genuinely believed they had somehow qualified for new, benevolent financial assistance programs. Bethany, ever self-absorbed, thought her scholarship came from some anonymous alumni foundation, a recognition of her unique, undeveloped talents. I wanted to help them. I really did. But I desperately wanted to do it without fundamentally changing our relationship dynamic, without becoming the dreaded family ATM, and most importantly, without having to endure another single moment of my parents praising Bethany for receiving financial help, while I had clawed and worked and sacrificed for everything I had ever achieved. Looking back, I realize now I was enabling a lot of unhealthy patterns. I was, in a way, protecting them from the consequences of their own choices, and insulating Bethany from the realities of adult responsibility. Instead of helping my family grow, I was essentially keeping them in a gilded cage of financial dependence. But at the time, it genuinely felt like the kindest, most practical solution. I believed I was preserving their dignity while ensuring they were taken care of. What I didn't realize, couldn't possibly have foreseen, was how my profound secrecy would eventually collide head-on with Bethany's deep-seated jealousy, creating the perfect storm that nearly destroyed our family completely. The acquisition of Bioluminate wasn't just successful, it was the kind of exit that made headlines in national business publications, even got mentioned on tech news channels. Our small team had developed an innovative bioalgorithm for data processing that a major pharmaceutical giant, Omni Health, simply couldn't resist. When the dust settled, the paperwork signed, the shares transferred, I found myself with a net worth comfortably over $12 million before my 30th birthday. It was a dizzying sum. I was deliberate about my wealth. I moved a significant portion into conservative, long-term investments. I donated generously to causes I deeply cared about, particularly those supporting young women in STEM. I bought myself a comfortable, but certainly not extravagant, house in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland. And crucially, I set aside a very significant portion, a dedicated fund, for my family's needs. I wasn't flashy about it. I still drove the same reliable Honda sedan I'd had for years. and I lived well below my means. Few people in my life, beyond Daniel and my financial advisor, knew the true extent of my financial situation, which was exactly how I wanted it. When I first discovered my parents' bakery was failing, I was genuinely shocked by how dire their situation had become. They were indeed 3 months behind on their mortgage, their credit cards were maxed out, and they had taken out predatory loans from shady lenders just to keep the Daily Crumb open. The weight of that knowledge, the sheer burden of it, was overwhelming. These were the people who had always portrayed themselves as financially savvy, who had lectured me, the responsible one, about managing money wisely, all while indulging Bethany's every whim and never teaching her the value of $1. "Miss Hayes, are you absolutely sure you want to structure things this way?" Mr. Albright, my financial advisor, asked me, his brow furrowed with professional concern. We were sitting in his impeccably tidy office, overlooking the Portland skyline. I had just finished explaining my intricate plan to help my family anonymously. Family financial entanglements can get incredibly complicated, incredibly quickly. Layers of secrecy rarely simplify things. "I'm sure," I insisted, my voice firm despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "They can't know it's coming from me. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Mr. Albright, ever the professional, sighed but agreed to help. He guided me through the creation of several legal entities that would serve as impenetrable buffers between my money and my family. We established a trust that, on paper, appeared to be funded by a distant, long-lost relative of my father, a wealthy, eccentric great-aunt they vaguely remembered. We then created a separate, legitimate-looking scholarship fund for Bethany, ostensibly from a founder's legacy grant for emerging artists, given Bethany dabbled in painting. And for the bakery, we set up a community business revitalization program that would select struggling local businesses for assistance. The paperwork, the legal structures, everything was meticulously legitimate. The only thing they didn't know was that the ultimate source of all this funding was me, Alice Hayes. Within weeks, my parents received a letter informing them they'd been approved for a special mortgage refinancing program that would magically reduce their mortgage payment by 60%. Another letter arrived offering a substantial local business stabilization grant. And Bethany, of course, received notice that an anonymous donor had selected her for a full-ride scholarship that included tuition, housing, and a generous monthly stipend. The change in their lives was immediate, dramatic, and visible even from afar. My parents stopped looking stressed and haunted at family dinners. A lightness returned to their eyes. Bethany, of course, moved from her cramped dorm room to a genuinely luxurious apartment near campus, complete with a rooftop patio. Their gratitude, their relief, was all directed at these faceless institutions, these lucky breaks, these acts of cosmic kindness. Never, not once, was it directed at me. For a while, this arrangement, this intricate web of secrets, seemed perfect. I could help my family, keep them afloat, without changing our already strained relationship dynamic. I thought I had found the ultimate workaround. But cracks, as Mr. Albright had warned, soon began to appear. Despite having her entire education and living expenses fully covered, Bethany began dropping classes. By her junior year, she was barely enrolled part-time, though she dutifully told our parents she was focusing on her core major courses. I, however, as the scholarship provider, received the real enrollment reports directly from the university. Her academic performance was abysmal. Even more concerning was her pattern with relationships and jobs. She'd date someone for a few months, inevitably create some kind of high-drama breakup, and then spend lavishly on spa days, shopping sprees, weekend getaways, to heal her broken heart. She'd get hired somewhere, work for a few weeks, inevitably clash with management, quit, or more often, get fired. And then she'd take months, sometimes half a year, to even look for another position, all while maintaining her luxury lifestyle thanks to the generous scholarship stipend I was providing. It was infuriating to watch from a distance. When Bethany maxed out her first credit card at 21, I received a desperate call from my mother. "Alice, I hate to ask, but your sister is in a bit of financial trouble. We helped as much as we could, but with the bakery still recovering." I pretended to contribute a small amount, a token gesture, while secretly paying off the entire exorbitant balance through my financial network. This pattern repeated several times over the next few years, each time the amounts growing larger, the requests from my mother more frantic. It felt like I was constantly patching leaks in a sinking ship that Bethany was actively boring holes into. When Daniel proposed after 2 wonderful years of dating, I was ecstatic. We planned a wedding for the following spring. Nothing ostentatious, nothing over the top, but beautiful and deeply meaningful. My parents, wanting to contribute, insisted on covering some of the wedding expenses, so I discreetly arranged for them to receive an unexpected insurance reimbursement from a long-forgotten property claim. This allowed them to pay for wedding expenses using, you guessed it, my money, all while maintaining their pride and sense of contribution. It was exhausting, this constant financial maneuvering. As wedding planning progressed, Bethany's behavior, which had always been erratic, became alarmingly so. As my maid of honor, she was involved in many aspects of the planning, which in hindsight was a terrible idea. She seemed to actively sabotage at every turn. Appointments with vendors were mysteriously rescheduled without my knowledge. Deposits somehow went missing. Crucial vendor communications were accidentally deleted from her phone. At first, I tried to attribute these incidents to Bethany's general disorganization, her flightiness, her self-centered nature, but a distinct pattern was emerging, one I could no longer ignore. One late night, while I was reviewing my financial monitoring systems, a habit I'd developed to keep tabs on the secret funds, I noticed a series of unusual withdrawals from Bethany's account. More alarmingly, she had visited an urgent care clinic, followed by several purchases at a medical supply store around the same time. I then found evidence, digital breadcrumbs she'd left, of her researching pregnancy symptoms, complex medical terminology, and, most unsettlingly, how to create fake medical documents. A cold, heavy sense of dread washed over me. It was like a physical blow. I immediately increased the monitoring on her accounts and communications, justifying the invasion of privacy with my rapidly escalating concern for my wedding, and frankly, my sanity. What I discovered next was worse, far worse, than I could have possibly imagined. Bethany wasn't just jealous of my wedding. She was actively, methodically, plotting to ruin it. Wedding planning should have been one of the happiest, most joyful times of my life. But Bethany, with her unique brand of passive-aggressive manipulation, managed to turn it into a minefield of stress and doubt. As my maid of honor, she had access to almost every detail, every contact, every aspect of the wedding, which gave her ample opportunity for sabotage. The first red flag appeared about 3 months before the wedding. I arrived at Petal and Vine, our chosen florist, for a consultation, only to be told my appointment had been rescheduled for the following week. Bethany had called, claiming to be my assistant, and changed it without telling me. When I confronted her, she feigned innocence with a practiced ease. "Oh, Alice, I thought I told you. I must have forgotten to text you after they called me. Wedding brain, right?" She laughed it off, but something in her eyes didn't match her carefree explanation. They were too bright, too calculating. A week later, our wedding venue, the Shoreline Pavilion, called in a panic. They hadn't received the deposit to secure our date. I distinctly remembered giving Bethany a check to deliver during her lunch break, as the venue was conveniently near her apartment. The check, I confirmed, had been cashed, but somehow the money had never reached the venue's account. Bethany, when confronted, claimed there must have been a mix-up at their office, and ever the helpful sister offered to handle it. I later discovered through my banking system that she had deposited the check directly into her own account and used my money to make a down payment on a brand new, very flashy convertible. "It was just a timing issue with my account," she explained, her voice airy when I confronted her with the irrefutable bank records. "I was going to transfer the money to them this week, honestly." Foolishly, unbelievably, I chose to believe her, writing it off as Bethany's typical financial irresponsibility rather than outright malice. Looking back, I was willfully blind, so desperate to maintain the peace that I ignored every blaring alarm. The engagement party, held a month before Daniel's birthday celebration, provided even more chilling evidence of Bethany's true intentions. Daniel's older brother, Robert, a straightforward and honest man, pulled me aside during the festivities. "Alice, I don't want to cause drama," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "But I think you should know your sister has been texting Daniel pretty frequently. He mentioned she keeps asking him to meet for coffee to discuss wedding surprises for you." I felt a cold dread spread through me. When I asked Daniel privately later that night, he confirmed it. showing me the increasingly flirtatious and boundary-crossing messages from Bethany. He had been politely deflecting them, not wanting to create tension between us. "I thought she was just trying to be friendly," he said, looking troubled. "Should I be worried, Alice?" "No," I assured him, my voice firmer than I felt. "No, I'll handle Bethany." When I confronted her about the messages, she burst into tears, a theatrical deluge complete with trembling lips and wet, glistening eyes. "I was just trying to make sure Daniel was good enough for you, Alice. He's so perfect. I was just vetting him." Her performance was so convincing, I almost believed her, until I noticed her constantly checking her reflection in a nearby decorative mirror, subtly adjusting her face to see how she looked while crying. It was sickening. Around this time, Bethany began mentioning mysterious doctor appointments and vague, increasingly dramatic health concerns. At first, she was coy about the details, dropping hints like breadcrumbs for our family to follow. "I don't want to worry anyone," she'd say at family dinner, pushing her food around her plate, "but the doctor wants to run some additional tests. It's probably nothing, of course." My mother, predictably, would immediately launch into a full-blown panic, demanding details, offering to accompany Bethany to every single appointment. My father would grow quiet, his face lined with worry. The attention, as always, would remain squarely on Bethany for the rest of the evening, any mention of wedding plans completely forgotten. During bridesmaid dress fittings, Bethany created another scene, claiming she needed a significantly larger size because she was retaining water due to her serious medical condition. When the seamstress, a no-nonsense woman, politely suggested alterations instead of a new dress, Bethany became tearful. "You don't understand," she whispered, loudly enough for everyone in the boutique to hear. "There might be a reason I need extra room in a few months, if you know what I mean." The other bridesmaids, bless their naive hearts, immediately swarmed her with questions, well wishes, and congratulations, despite Bethany's theatrical insistence that it was far too early to say anything definite. I watched this entire performance with growing suspicion, noting how her eyes constantly darted to gauge my reaction, to see if her little charade was having the desired effect on me. My doubts continued to multiply, festering in the back of my mind, but family loyalty, that insidious binding force, kept me from voicing them, from rocking the boat. Then fate, or perhaps just messy family habits, intervened. I found Bethany's old journal while helping my parents clean out their dusty attic. I knew, rationally, I shouldn't read it. But when I saw my name and Daniel's name repeatedly mentioned, scrawled in angry, desperate script, my curiosity, overriding every ethical boundary I had, took over. The entries confirmed my absolute worst fears. "Alice always gets everything," one entry raged. "The perfect grades, the perfect job, now the perfect fiancé. Mom and Dad pretend to be proud of me too, but I see how they look at her. Now she's having this big fancy wedding while I'm still stuck. It's not fair, but I have a plan. A plan that will make everyone forget about Alice's perfect day. By the time I'm done, all anyone will remember about this wedding is me." Another entry detailed, in chillingly precise detail, her research into creating fake medical documents, and her elaborate plan to announce a life-threatening illness, and then complications during the wedding festivities to steal the spotlight. She had even practiced her concerned but brave face in the mirror, critiquing her own performance. I should have confronted her immediately. I should have exploded. But part of me, the part that was still desperate for a functional family, couldn't believe my own sister would go this far. I needed more evidence, irrefutable proof, and unfortunately, Bethany was about to provide it. As the wedding week arrived, and family gathered from across the country in Seabreeze, Bethany's health concerns intensified dramatically. She scheduled her dramatic revelation for Daniel's birthday celebration, knowing it would be a large, captive audience. I watched her preparations with a growing sense of dread, but also a quiet, steel-edged determination. She had no idea that I knew her entire plan, and she certainly had no idea how much power I actually held over her life, over all their lives. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change our family forever. The night of Daniel's birthday celebration, I slipped a slim folder of financial documents into my purse. It wasn't just bank statements. It was irrefutable evidence of my years of clandestine support. A paper trail stretching back half a decade. If Bethany wanted to play with fire, she was about to learn that I, quite literally, controlled the whole damn forest. Our celebration was held at Cliffside Manor, an upscale, historic restaurant perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Daniel and I had chosen it for its elegant, intimate atmosphere and its exceptional seafood. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, inviting glow over the long mahogany table where 40 of our closest friends and family gathered. The room hummed with conversation and laughter as everyone enjoyed appetizers and sparkling cider before the main meal. I should have been savoring these moments, soaking in the joy of being surrounded by people I loved, celebrating Daniel, but my attention was fixed, laser-focused, on Bethany. She was acting increasingly strange. She kept checking her phone, stepping away for mysterious, important calls, and whispering conspiratorially with one of her friends who wasn't even part of our core family group. She'd chosen to wear a fitted dress that accentuated her midsection, which she kept rubbing absently, making sure everyone noticed. "Are you feeling okay, Bethany?" my mother asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Her voice was laced with genuine concern, bordering on anxiety. "You seem uncomfortable, sweetheart." "I'm fine, Mom," Bethany replied, her voice a little too breathy, her brave smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just a little tired. The doctor said I need to rest more in my condition." My mother's eyes widened, and she immediately launched into a hushed but animated conversation with Bethany, her hand clasped over Bethany's. I watched them from across the room, noting how Bethany strategically positioned herself so most of the guests, especially my parents and Daniel's family, could observe their apparently private, dramatic discussion. Daniel approached, handing me a glass of sparkling cider. "Everything okay? You've barely smiled all evening." "Just sweating nerves," I lied, the words feeling sour in my mouth. I didn't want to ruin his night with my swirling suspicions. Not yet. "I'm just going to check on the seating arrangements again." It was a flimsy excuse, but it bought me time. I continued to watch Bethany, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm in my chest. Finally, she put down her phone and excused herself to visit the restroom. The moment she disappeared down the hallway, I made my move. Her designer clutch sat unattended at her place setting, her phone resting on top of it, screen still unlocked. I knew I had perhaps 2 minutes, maybe less, before she returned. My heart pounded against my ribs as I quickly picked up the phone, feeling like a thief despite being in pursuit of a much larger truth. A text conversation with someone named Chloe was open on the screen. "Bethany, the fake report is perfect. Doctor's office letterhead and everything." Chloe, "OMG, are you really going through with this?" Bethany, "Hell yes. The announcement tonight, then complications during the ceremony. All eyes on me, not Miss Perfect." Chloe, "What if someone calls the doctor to check?" Bethany, "No one would dare. Besides, I'll have a miraculous recovery after the honeymoon. Perfect timing to ruin their return." Chloe, "Your sister will hate you forever." Bethany, "She'll get over it. Besides, she has everything else. I deserve one day where people care about me." My hands shook, a combination of simmering rage and profound heartbreak. I quickly scrolled through more messages, finding photos of the forged medical documents, complete with official-looking stamps and signatures. There were also chilling details of her plan to fake sudden crying spells, vague dizzy spells, and eventually, a dramatic collapse during our wedding vows, forcing the entire ceremony to stop. With trembling fingers, I quickly took photos of the conversations and the forged documents with my own phone. Then I returned Bethany's phone to her clutch, exactly as I'd found it. It must have been mere seconds before I heard her footsteps returning. When Bethany returned to the table, our eyes met across the crowded room. I maintained a neutral, almost blank expression, but something in my gaze, perhaps the sheer weight of what I now knew, must have alarmed her. She quickly looked away, busying herself by talking animatedly to one of Daniel's groomsmen, avoiding my eyes. Dinner was served, a beautiful, multi-course meal, but I barely tasted it. As coffee and dessert arrived, my father, oblivious to the simmering tension, stood to make a toast. He tapped his glass with a spoon, and the room gradually quieted. "Friends, family," he began, his voice warm, "we are so happy to celebrate Daniel's birthday tonight, and to soon celebrate the union of two wonderful souls." Just as he raised his glass, Bethany dramatically placed her hand on her stomach and gasped, a loud, attention-grabbing sound that cut through the pleasant murmur of conversation. The timing was impeccable. interrupting the father of the bride's sentiments moments before he could praise his daughter. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice carrying perfectly across the now silent room, designed to garner maximum sympathy. "I wasn't going to say anything this weekend, because I didn't want to take any attention away from Alice and Daniel. But," she paused for effect, tears welling theatrically in her eyes, "I've been having some complications with my condition. The doctor said I need to take it easy, but I wanted to be here for my sister, for Daniel's birthday." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. My mother rushed to Bethany's side, her face a mask of worry. My father stood frozen, his toast forgotten, his hand still holding the glass aloft. Daniel looked at me, confusion etched on his face, clearly wondering if I had known about this condition, this sudden dramatic health crisis. A strange, quiet calm descended over me, the kind of calm that comes when you finally reached your breaking point and found unexpected clarity. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my own glass of cider still in my hand. The room gradually quieted again as people noticed me, preparing to speak. "Thank you for your concern for my sister," I said, my voice steady, clear, projecting across the room. "But I think before we go any further, we should clarify something." I turned my gaze directly to Bethany, who still had my mother's arm around her. "Bethany, would you like to tell everyone the truth about your condition, or should I?" Bethany's face paled, visibly, but she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing in defiance. "Alice, I know you're upset about the timing, but this isn't about you for once." I smiled tightly, a humorless, knowing smile. "You're right, Bethany. It isn't about me. It's about you lying to everyone in this room." "There is no life-threatening illness, is there, Bethany?" Gasps echoed around the table. My mother made a small, choked sound. Bethany's expression hardened, a mask of rage replacing her earlier fragile act. "How dare you? Why would I lie about something like this? To ruin your moment? You're unbelievable." "To ruin my wedding, according to your text with Chloe," I stated calmly, holding up my phone, showing the screenshots I'd taken of their conversation. The forged doctor's report appeared on the screen as I scrolled through. The fake doctor's report was a nice touch, Bethany. Very convincing letterhead. Bethany's face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage, a flash of pure malice. But then it shifted, almost imperceptibly, to a smug, defiant smirk. "You went through my phone?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "That's a new low, Alice. Always the perfect sister, right? Well, at least I don't pretend to be something I'm not. Everyone thinks you're so successful, so put together, but you're just a pathetic control freak who can't stand it when someone else gets attention." It was the moment I'd been waiting for. The perfect opening. I reached into my purse, pulled out the folder I'd prepared. The one filled with irrefutable proof. "Speaking of control," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "Did you ever wonder how you could afford that luxury apartment on part-time retail wages? Or how our parents magically recovered from near bankruptcy 5 years ago? Or where your founder's legacy grant scholarship came from after you failed half your classes?" Bethany's smug expression faltered, her jaw going slack. My mother made a small noise of distress, covering her mouth with her hand. "Alice, this isn't the time," my father began, his voice hoarse, a hint of desperation in his eyes. But I cut him off. "Actually, Dad, this is exactly the time. For years, I've been funding this entire family. The mortgage on your house, Dad. The bakery's business recovery grant. Mom, your medical bills, all the way back to Grandma's surgery. Bethany's apartment, her car payments, her credit card debt. I've paid off her credit cards 7 times in the last 3 years alone. And yes, the scholarship that mysteriously never required any academic performance." I opened the folder, pulling out several thick documents, and placed them neatly on the long mahogany table. "It's all here. Bank transfers, shell companies, trust arrangements. I own the company that technically owns your house, Dad. I'm the anonymous donor behind Bethany's scholarship fund. I'm the community business revitalization program that saved the bakery." The room had gone completely silent. The only sound was the distant murmur of the ocean. Daniel was staring at me in shock, his face pale. This, I realized, was completely new to him too. My mother had collapsed into her chair, one hand still clamped over her mouth, tears silently streaming down her face. My father stood rigidly, his face ashen, looking as if he'd aged 20 years in an instant. Bethany's expression shifted, rapidly, from confusion to dawning horror as she processed what I was saying, as the full weight of her financial dependence on me crashed down on her. "You're lying," she whispered. But her voice lacked conviction, utterly devoid of its usual theatricality. "The fake medical report isn't the only fake document in this family, Bethany," I said, my voice quiet, almost gentle, but filled with an icy resolve. "The difference is mine were created to help you, not to hurt you." I turned to address our stunned guests, my voice rising slightly, taking control of the room. "I apologize profoundly for this unexpected family drama. Please, everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening. Daniel and I look forward to celebrating with you all at our wedding tomorrow, assuming we still have one after all these revelations." As I turned and walked out of the elegant dining room, my head held high, I heard it. Bethany began to sob. Real tears this time. Not the performative crocodile tears she'd perfected over the years, but raw, broken, agonizing sobs. Part of me, the old compliant Alice, felt terrible for exposing her this way, for stripping away her carefully constructed facade in front of everyone. But a much, much larger part felt an overwhelming, exhilarating sense of relief. The intricate web of lies I'd been maintaining for years, the one I thought was protecting everyone, had become its own suffocating trap. And maybe, just maybe, this painful public truth was our only way forward. Did your family ever hide important secrets from each other, thinking it was for the best? I thought I was protecting everyone, preserving dignity, avoiding conflict. But keeping all these financial arrangements secret just set us up for an even bigger, more catastrophic explosion. If you're still with me at this halfway point, drop a comment below. Let me know whether you think I should have revealed everything earlier, or if you've ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your family, even if it meant tearing everything down first. This story, believe it or not, was about to take an even more intense turn that I never saw coming. After I walked out of Cliffside Manor that night, I didn't go straight home, I just drove, aimlessly. For nearly an hour, the salty scent of the ocean breeze doing nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. My phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all. Finally, Daniel's simple message broke through my emotional numbness. It just read, "I'm at your place whenever you're ready to talk. No pressure. I love you." His calm, steady message, those 3 simple words, were a lifeline. I drove home, pulling into my driveway to find him waiting on the porch swing, 2 steaming mugs of tea beside him. When I sat down beside him, he didn't pepper me with questions or judgments. He didn't demand explanations. He simply put his arm around me and waited. I should have told you," I finally managed to say, my voice raw, the words catching in my throat. "About the money, about all of it." "Yes, you should have," he agreed quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "But I understand why you didn't." "You do?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Alice, I've watched how your family treats you for 2 years now," he said, turning to look at me, his eyes full of understanding. "You're the responsible one, the fixer, the achiever who never gets the same praise or attention as your sister. You found a way to help them, to protect them, without becoming their ATM or changing how they see you. It wasn't honest, no. But in a complicated, deeply messed up way, it was kind. It was your way of loving them, even if it was unhealthy." His profound understanding, his absolute lack of judgment, brought fresh tears to my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, not despair. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "That depends," Daniel said, squeezing my hand gently. "Do you still want to marry me tomorrow despite everything?" A small shaky laugh escaped me. "That's the only thing I'm still sure about." Daniel smiled, a genuine, comforting smile. "Then we'll figure out the rest together." My moment of peace, however, was interrupted. My phone vibrated again. My father, for the 12th time, I finally answered. "We need to talk," he said, his voice grave, strained. "Everyone's at the house, including Bethany." The emergency family meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as I expected. Perhaps even more so. My parents' living room, the very house I'd secretly been paying for, felt suffocating, filled with unspoken accusations and years of pent-up resentment. My mother sat rigid on the sofa, her eyes red and puffy from crying. My father paced by the fireplace, his usually proud posture slumped. Bethany was curled in an armchair, looking smaller, more fragile than I'd seen her in years, her face blotchy from crying. "Explain everything, Alice," my father demanded the moment I walked in. From the beginning, every single detail. And so I did. I told them everything. About the bioluminate acquisition, the money I'd made, discovering their desperate financial troubles, and my elaborate plan to help them without changing our family dynamic. I explained the shell companies, the fake scholarship fund, the business grants, and all the times I'd secretly bailed out Bethany's ever-growing debts. I laid it all bare. "Why didn't you just tell us?" my mother asked, her voice breaking, thick with a mix of betrayal and raw hurt. "Why all the deception? Why the secrecy?" "Would you have accepted my help?" I countered, my voice rising slightly, the question hanging in the air. "Honestly, would it have changed how you treat me compared to Bethany? Or would I have just become the family bank, a resource to be tapped, while still hearing about how special and precious she is, how you always had to protect her?" My father flinched at my words, his face tightening. "We don't favor—" "Dad, please," I interrupted, cutting him off before the usual denial could begin. My patience for their selective amnesia had finally worn thin. My entire childhood, I heard, "Why can't you be more like Bethany when it came to being sociable?" But never once did I hear, "Why can't Bethany be more like Alice when it came to responsibility or achievement?" I paid for her luxury apartment while she dropped out of classes. And you still praised her for her independence while asking me why I worked so much and wasn't more balanced. An uncomfortable, deafening silence filled the room. It was the silence of unspoken truths, of long-held resentments finally brought to light. Finally, Bethany spoke, her voice quiet, almost hoarse, utterly devoid of its usual manipulative charm. "I didn't know," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the patterned rug beneath her feet. "About the money, any of it. That was the point, wasn't it?" She looked up then, meeting my eyes, her own filled with a raw, uncharacteristic vulnerability. But why? Why help me, Alice, when I've been so awful to you, so manipulative?" "Because you're my sister," I said simply. The ancient ingrained bond of family asserting itself even through all the pain. And because I thought if I removed the financial stresses, if I took away that pressure, maybe our family could just be normal. Maybe we could finally just be a family that wasn't constantly struggling, constantly fighting over money. Bethany slowly unfolded herself from the armchair and walked to the center of the room. She stood there, trembling slightly, but her voice, when it came, was steadier than I expected, infused with a new, startling honesty. "I need to tell you all something," she began, looking at each of us in turn, finally meeting my parents' gaze. "Alice is right about the condition. I faked it. All of it. I was going to pretend to have a medical emergency during the ceremony tomorrow. A big dramatic collapse, right as you were saying your vows." She swallowed hard, her throat visibly working. "But that's not all. I also contacted Daniel's ex-girlfriend, the one from college, and invited her to object during the ceremony. And I've been trying to get Daniel's attention since the day they got engaged, sending him all those messages, trying to undermine you, Alice." My mother gasped, a sharp, choked sound. "Bethany, how could you?" "Because I'm jealous, okay?" Bethany's voice rose, cracking with raw emotion. The floodgates finally breaking. "I've always been jealous of Alice. Everyone thinks I was the favorite, the golden child. But being the favorite just meant no one expected anything from me. Do you know what it's like living in the shadow of someone like her? Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect fiancé, and I'm a college dropout working retail at 26, barely making ends meet. And now I find out I couldn't even manage that without my big sister secretly funding everything." Her raw honesty, her brutal self-assessment stunned me. For the first time, truly, I saw my sister not as my rival, not as the pampered family favorite, but as someone who'd been profoundly damaged by the exact same unhealthy family dynamic that had hurt me, just in a profoundly different way. She was a product of their enabling, just as I was a product of their neglect. My father sank heavily into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. His face was etched with profound regret. "We failed you both," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Alice, we put too much responsibility on you. Took you for granted. Burdened you. Bethany, we didn't give you the structure and expectations you needed to thrive. We loved you, but we loved you wrong. My mother wiped her eyes, her gaze still fixed on Bethany. What happens now, Alice? Will you keep supporting us? The naked anxiety, the raw vulnerability in her question confirmed what I'd always feared. That financial support, my ability to fix things, was the only real value I had to them. Before I could answer, Daniel spoke from the doorway, where he had been quietly observing the entire devastating exchange. I think that's the wrong question, Mrs. Miller, he said gently, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. Maybe the first question should be how to rebuild trust in this family, not who's paying for what. I never loved him more than in that moment. The wedding is postponed, I announced, my voice firm, allowing no room for argument. Daniel and I will decide later if and when we reschedule. As for financial support, I took a deep, fortifying breath. It stops today, all of it. But the mortgage, my father began, his voice laced with panic. You have 2 months of payments left in the account, I interjected. That's enough time to figure out your next steps. Bethany, your lease is paid through the end of the month. You can't just cut us off, my mother protested, her voice rising in disbelief. I can, I said, meeting her eyes directly, my gaze unwavering. And I am, not to punish you, but because this arrangement isn't healthy for any of us. I've enabled dependencies that have stunted our growth as a family. We can't heal if we're all still trapped in this financial charade. My pronouncement was met with shocked, agonizing silence. Bethany was the first to recover. She's right, she said, her voice surprisingly strong, surprising everyone in the room, including me. This isn't normal or healthy. I need to stand on my own 2 feet for once, truly. In the days that followed, our extended family in Seabreeze took sides in the conflict. Some cousins thought I was cruel for abandoning my family and cutting off support. Others praised me for finally establishing boundaries, for holding my ground. I started seeing a therapist, a wonderful woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, to process my complicated feelings about my family, my identity, and my role in creating and now dismantling the unhealthy dynamic. Daniel stood by me through it all, never judging, always supportive, a quiet, reassuring presence amidst the chaos. One night, as we discussed whether to reschedule the wedding quickly or simply elope to escape the drama, Daniel offered an insight that would forever change my perspective. You know what's interesting about your family, Alice, he said, swirling the ice in his glass. You've all been living according to a script about who you are. You're the responsible one. Bethany's the favorite. Your parents are the struggling but proud business owners. But none of you chose those roles. You inherited them, and you never questioned them, until now. So what do we do now, I asked, looking at him, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within me. Rewrite the script, he said simply. All of you, together. With that thought, that simple yet profound instruction, firmly in mind, I approached the daunting task of rebuilding my family relationships, not as the responsible big sister, or the secret benefactor, or the designated fixer, but simply as Alice, figuring it out one day at a time. 1 month after the dramatic confrontation at Cliffside Manor, the full impact of the financial reckoning hit my family like a tidal wave. Bethany received an eviction notice from her luxury apartment when she couldn't make her rent payment. Her flashy convertible, which I'd been making payments on for years, was at risk of repossession. My parents, who had been living in a house they couldn't afford and maintaining a lifestyle far beyond their actual means, faced the harsh, unforgiving reality of their true financial situation for the first time in years. I maintained my distance, as Dr. Reed had advised, but I stayed informed through Daniel. He had, unexpectedly and quite naturally, become the family mediator, the neutral ground they could all speak to. He reported that my parents were arguing constantly about money, my mother wanting to swallow her pride and ask me for help again. My father stubbornly insisting they needed to solve their own problems for once. Your dad's looking at retirement account options, Daniel told me after having coffee with my father. And your mom is researching how to sell the house themselves to avoid realtor fees. And Bethany, I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was thumping. "She's applied for 7 jobs in the past week," Daniel said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Actual full-time positions, not just retail gigs." I felt a complex mix of emotions swirling inside me: guilt for their struggles, pride that they were finally taking action, and a lingering, dull ache of hurt from years of family dynamics that had led to this painful, necessary breaking point. After 6 weeks of complete separation, I agreed to meet my parents for lunch. Their choice of venue, a modest, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Seabreeze, rather than their usual upscale restaurant. This in itself signaled a profound change. My mother had lost some weight, and my father's hair seemed grayer, but they both greeted me with a genuine warmth, rather than the tense formality I'd expected. "We've been working with a financial advisor," my father said, after we ordered our simple sandwiches, his voice subdued, "creating a realistic budget based on our actual income, not like supplements. We should have done this years ago." "We're selling the house," my mother added, her voice quiet but firm. "We found a nice condo that's within our means, smaller but cozy." I nodded, genuinely surprised by their pragmatic, accountable approach. "That sounds sensible," I said. "Alice," my father said, leaning forward across the table, his gaze direct and unwavering, "we owe you an apology, not just for taking your money without knowing, but for all the years before that. We placed too much responsibility on you, and we gave too little structure to Bethany. We see that now, clearly." "We've started family therapy," my mother added, her eyes meeting mine, a glimmer of hope in them. "All 3 of us. We'd like you to join when you're ready, if you're ready." Their humility, their genuine self-awareness, caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, blame, or subtle manipulation, not this raw, honest accountability. After lunch, Daniel suggested a compromise that genuinely surprised me. "Alice," he said, as we walked along the beach, the waves crashing softly on the shore, "what if you set up a proper, transparent financial arrangement, not secretly funding everything, but maybe helping with specific things, with clear boundaries?" "Like what?" I asked, intrigued. "Like offering to help your parents with a down payment on the condo, as a gift, not a secret payment, or helping Bethany with tuition if she goes back to school, but with clear academic requirements, a support system, not an endless ATM." The idea had merit. It would allow me to help my family, if I chose, without enabling dependency or fostering resentment. After careful consideration, I called a family meeting at Daniel's house, neutral territory free from the ghosts of old conflicts. Bethany arrived first, and I was genuinely struck by how different she looked. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfectly styled hair, the carefully constructed facade. She wore simple jeans and a practical blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "I got a job," she announced without preamble, her voice tinged with a mix of exhaustion and pride. "At Westfield Architecture. Daniel's friend Carlos hired me as an office manager." "That's great, Bethany," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "How is it going?" "Hard," she admitted, slumping onto the sofa. "Really hard. I've never had to be somewhere at 8 a.m. sharp every day, actually accountable for things. But I kind of like it. Having structure, I mean." My parents arrived next, carrying a folder of financial documents, their faces a mixture of nervousness and newfound purpose. "We've worked out a budget, Alice," my father explained, handing me the folder, "based solely on our income and the equity we'll get from downsizing. And we'd like your input." "Not your money," my mother added quickly, as if reading my thoughts. "Just your advice." I reviewed their plans. I was genuinely impressed by their thoroughness. The condo they'd found was modest but nice, and their new budget accounted for all necessities, while eliminating the luxuries they'd grown accustomed to. "This looks solid," I said, returning the folder. "I'd like to make a proposal, though." I outlined my limited support plan: a one-time gift to help with the condo down payment, contingent on them sticking to their budget; tuition assistance for Bethany if she returned to school, contingent on her maintaining a B average; and a small, clearly defined emergency fund for true family crises, administered by an independent trustee, not by me directly. "This isn't an ATM arrangement," I clarified. "These are specific supports, with clear boundaries and expectations." To my surprise, my father shook his head. "Alice, we appreciate the offer, truly. But we need to do this ourselves. For now. Maybe we can revisit in a year or 2, when we've proven to ourselves, as much as to you, that we can be financially responsible. Their refusal of my help, their insistence on self-sufficiency was perhaps the strongest evidence that real, fundamental change was occurring. It was a staggering moment. As we continued talking, another revelation emerged. A detail I hadn't been aware of. Bethany had been stealing from our parents for years, taking cash from their wallets, skimming money from the bakery's register, directly contributing to their financial problems. I'd convinced myself they owed it to me, she admitted, not meeting anyone's eyes, her voice barely a whisper. I never thought of it as stealing. Not really. The admission stunned me. All this time, I'd been secretly supporting everyone, plugging financial holes, and Bethany had been secretly undermining that support from within. The dysfunction, I realized, ran even deeper than I'd originally thought. After the meeting, Bethany asked to speak with me privately. We walked to a nearby park, sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond. The afternoon sun warming our faces. I hit rock bottom last week, Alice, she said, her voice quiet, watching ducks glide across the water. Got down to my last $20. No credit, no savings, nothing. I even went to a pawn shop to sell Mom's bracelet that I'd borrowed. Did you sell it? I asked, my voice soft. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I couldn't go through with it. That's when I realized how far I'd fallen, ready to sell a stolen family heirloom just for cash. I walked out and applied for jobs all day instead. Her vulnerability, her raw, unfiltered honesty, cracked something open in me. For the first time in years, maybe ever, we were having an honest conversation, without pretense, without competition. I never wanted to hurt you, she continued, her voice thick. Not really, I just wanted what you had. Not the money, but the confidence, the certainty. You always knew who you were and what you wanted. You always had a plan. I laughed softly, a genuine, unburdened laugh. Bethany, that's the biggest myth about me. I've been terrified and uncertain plenty of times. I just didn't show it, because I couldn't. I was the responsible one, the achiever. That was my role, and I thought I had to be perfect all the time. And I was the screw-up, Bethany said quietly, her eyes filling with a new understanding. The eternal child, who couldn't be trusted with responsibility. We sat in silence for a long time, contemplating how we'd both been constrained, warped even, by these family-assigned identities. I found your journal, I admitted, breaking the quiet. That's how I knew about the fake illness plan and the wedding sabotage. Instead of anger, Bethany looked relieved. I'm glad you did, she said, wiping a tear from her cheek. I don't think I would have had the courage to stop myself. As the sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, Bethany reached over and tentatively took my hand. I'm sorry, Alice, she said, her voice shaking. For everything. I want to be better. Not like you. I'll never be like you, but a better version of me. I squeezed her hand. I'd like to know that version of Bethany. Walking back to Daniel's house, I realized he was absolutely right. We were rewriting the script, creating new possibilities for who we could be, not just as individuals, but as a family. The process would be messy, it would be imperfect, but for the first time in years, it felt authentic. 6 months after the dramatic revelation at Cliffside Manor, I stood in the small dressing room of a charming beachside venue, adjusting the simple white dress I'd chosen. Daniel and I had decided to move forward with a much smaller, far more intimate wedding. 40 guests instead of 200. A local restaurant reception overlooking the water instead of a grand hotel ballroom. Wildflowers collected from nearby fields instead of elaborate, expensive arrangements. It felt so much more us. You look beautiful, Alice, my mother said softly from the doorway. Our relationship had transformed profoundly over the past months. Without the secret financial ties, without the unspoken resentments, and with the consistent help of family therapy, we had begun developing a more honest, vulnerable connection. She was learning to see me as a complete person, rather than just the responsible one, who held everything together, and I, in turn, was learning to share my vulnerabilities with her, to lean on her in ways I never had before. Is Bethany here? I asked, trying to sound casual, though a tremor of anticipation ran through me. My mother nodded. She's helping arrange the chairs on the beach. She's nervous about seeing you. Bethany was not in my wedding party this time. That level of trust would take much longer to rebuild, if it ever fully did. But I had invited her as a guest, a significant first step toward healing. The changes in our family over those 6 months had been truly remarkable. My parents had sold their large, unmanageable house and moved into the comfortable condo they could actually afford. My father had taken a part-time consulting position, advising small businesses, to supplement his retirement income, finding a new purpose. And my mother had started a small online business selling her handcrafted jewelry, finding joy in her own creative outlet. They weren't wealthy, not by any stretch, but they were making ends meet. And more importantly, they were doing it on their own terms, with dignity. Bethany had surprised everyone with her transformation. She was still working at Westfield Architecture and had even received her first promotion. She was taking evening classes to complete her business degree, aiming for a real career. She lived in a modest apartment with a roommate, drove a used car she'd purchased herself, and was slowly but steadily building her credit score through responsible financial habits. She was, quite simply, becoming a self-sufficient adult. Our family therapy sessions had been challenging, emotionally draining, but incredibly enlightening. We'd uncovered deeply ingrained patterns of behavior that stretched back generations. My father's parents, we learned, had openly favored his younger brother, creating the template he unconsciously replicated with his own daughters. My mother's family had always valued appearance over substance, which explained her profound discomfort with financial transparency and her need to maintain a perfect image. These insights didn't excuse the dysfunction, but they helped us understand it, acknowledge it, and begin the painstaking work of addressing it. Daniel and I had established clear, transparent boundaries about any future family financial support. We created a small education fund for Bethany, with very specific conditions. She needed to maintain her grades, continue therapy, and consistently demonstrate financial responsibility. For my parents, we offered matching contributions to a retirement account, encouraging their independence while providing a gentle safety net if they truly needed it. It was about partnership, not rescue. "It's time, Alice," my father said, appearing at the doorway, his eyes warm, his posture more relaxed, his smile more genuine than I'd seen it in years. "Ready?" I replied, taking his arm. We made our way down to the beach, where chairs had been arranged in a semicircle facing the vast, tranquil ocean. Daniel waited near the water's edge, handsome and steady in his light gray suit, a joyous smile on his face. Our closest friends and family members turned to watch. As my father walked me down the sandy aisle, I spotted Bethany in the second row, wearing a simple, elegant blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small, sincere smile. Not the performative grin she'd perfected over the years, but something real, a little vulnerable, and profoundly honest. The ceremony was brief, heartfelt, and utterly authentic. Daniel and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising honesty, partnership, and growth through all of life's inevitable messy complexities. As we sealed our marriage with a kiss, I felt a sense of rightness, a deep, abiding peace that had been missing from our original, elaborate wedding plans. This ceremony reflected who we truly were, not who we thought we should be. At the reception, held at a local restaurant overlooking the water, Bethany approached me hesitantly during the meal. "Congratulations, Alice," she said, keeping a respectful distance. Everything was beautiful." "Thank you for coming, Bethany," I replied, my voice soft. "It means a lot to me that you're here." An awkward silence stretched between us, the weight of our shared history still heavy in the air. Then Bethany took a deep breath. "I have something for you." She wasn't carrying a typical wedding gift. Instead, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a business plan, meticulously researched, professionally presented, for a small graphic design company she wanted to launch after completing her degree. "I'm not asking for funding," she clarified quickly, anticipating my thought. I just wanted your opinion, as someone who built something successful." I was genuinely touched by the gesture, and by what it represented. Bethany wasn't seeking manipulation or competition. She was seeking my input as an equal. "I'd be happy to review it, Bethany," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Maybe we could get coffee next week to discuss it." Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I'd like that." Later, during the toasts, Bethany surprised everyone by standing and asking to speak. Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly as she nervously approached the microphone. "I'm not in the wedding party," she began, her voice trembling slightly but clear. "And there are good reasons for that, many good reasons, but I wanted to say something. To my sister, Alice, and to Daniel." She paused, collecting herself, taking a visible breath. "Alice," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "you've always been my benchmark, the person I measured myself against. And I always fell short. It made me resent you instead of recognizing how much I could learn from you. What I've realized over these past months is that your success didn't take anything away from me. Your light doesn't diminish mine. It can help me find my own path." Tears pricked my eyes as she continued. "Daniel, thank you for loving my sister and for your incredible kindness to our family, even when we truly didn't deserve it. And thank you both, Alice and Daniel, for giving me the chance to be here today, to witness the beginning of your life together." She raised her glass, her hand steady now. "To Alice and Daniel, may your honesty with each other create the foundation for a lifetime of happiness." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of genuine connection I hadn't thought possible. After the toasts, while Daniel danced with my mother, my father sat beside me at the table. "I have a confession, Alice," he said quietly, his voice a little shaky. "I knew about your financial support earlier than you think, not the extent of it, but I suspected." "How?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "The timing was just too convenient," he explained, looking out at the dancing couples. "Our bakery troubles easing right when your company was acquired, but I didn't say anything because—" He looked away, embarrassed, shame etched on his face. "Because it was easier not to. I let pride and shame keep me from having an honest conversation with my own daughter, from asking for help when we needed it most." "We all made mistakes, Dad," I said gently, placing my hand over his. He nodded, a sigh escaping him. "But we're finding our way now, aren't we, as a family?" "Yes," I agreed, looking at him, truly seeing him. "I think we are." Our honeymoon was simple and perfect. A week at a quiet, unpretentious resort in the Caribbean, where Daniel and I swam in turquoise waters, read books, and talked for hours about our future. We discussed having children someday, and how we would approach parenting differently than our own families had. "We'll make different mistakes, Alice," Daniel pointed out pragmatically. "No parent is perfect." "True," I agreed, leaning my head on his shoulder. "But we'll be honest about them. No family secrets, no assigned roles, no financial deceptions, even the well-intentioned ones." On our last evening, watching the sunset from our balcony, painting the sky in fiery hues, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. The fake illness report, which had been meant to ruin my wedding and destroy my happiness, had ultimately saved our family. It had forced us to confront truths we'd all been avoiding, had brought the simmering dysfunction to a boiling point. Bethany's jealousy and my secret financial control hadn't been the problem themselves. They had been symptoms of a much deeper generational dysfunction that had finally been brought to light. When we returned home, I followed through on my promise to review Bethany's business plan. We met at a coffee shop in Seabreeze, and I was genuinely impressed by the thought and research she'd put into her concept. "This is really good, Bethany," I told her honestly. "You've identified a solid niche, and your financial projections are conservative but promising." "Really?" Her face lit up with a pure, unadulterated pride. "I've been researching business programs. I want to apply for my MBA after I finish my bachelor's degree." "I think you'd be excellent at it," I said, meaning every word. "Have you thought about applying for scholarships?" "Actually, yes," she beamed. "I've already submitted applications for 3 merit-based programs." She smiled slyly. "Real ones this time." As we continued discussing her plans, I realized we were having our first conversation as adults, not as the responsible sister and the favorite, not as the achiever and the screw-up, but as 2 women finding their way in the world, connected by blood and increasingly by choice. 6 months later, Bethany was accepted into a competitive business program with a partial scholarship. My parents had settled comfortably into their new, more modest lifestyle, thriving in their financial independence. Daniel and I had bought a new house, a home filled with light and laughter, with a guest room that had already hosted each family member for open, honest visits. The journey wasn't perfect. We still had disagreements, still occasionally fell back into old patterns for a moment. But the foundation had shifted, from secrets and resentment to honesty and growth. The sister who had once tried to sabotage my wedding was now someone I spoke with weekly, sharing advice, support, and a genuine connection. The parents who had once unknowingly accepted my financial support now stood proudly on their own feet, with appropriate boundaries and transparent communication. As for me, I was learning that being the fixer, the responsible one, wasn't my only identity. I could be vulnerable, I could ask for help, I could make mistakes, and I could still be valued, truly valued, for simply being Alice. The control I'd maintained through secret financial support had been an illusion, one that ultimately hurt everyone, including myself. Real control, I discovered, came from honesty about who we are, what we need, and how we show up for each other. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give our family isn't money or security, but the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that ended up transforming your relationships for the better? My sister's attempt to ruin my wedding actually saved our family by forcing us to confront truths we'd all been avoiding. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more family drama and resolution stories like mine. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with family dynamics of their own. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these complicated relationships can be incredibly healing. Drop a comment below about your own family karma moments. And thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Remember, sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something much, much better. Until next time.